Good evening folks, Silver here. Today's story is something a little different, an exploration of the past you might even say. What did our protagonist see? Let's find out. Also, before we begin, only a small percentage of you that listen to these stories are actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying this narration, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always unsubscribe later. With that, enjoy the story. Before this pandemic started, I managed to get my hands on a used copy of Pokemon Sword which I ordered from eBay, and it came in a clear disc case. I had recently become an adult, and became too busy to continue playing Pokemon games. Luckily for me, since I'm not allowed to go to work because of this virus, I have more time on my hands. I went home, inserted the game into my Switch, and finally started up Sword, something that I wasn't able to play before. The CD case was written in what looks to be a black Sharpie, reading SSMSYXWBPDSRSGGR. At that point, I had no clue as to why someone would write such random things on it. I then chose to ignore this as it probably didn't really serve any meaning. But this is where the differences start. Upon starting the game up, the title screen was skipped entirely, along with the introduction. I reset the game to see if the same thing happened, and it did. I simply said, oh well, I guess the gameplay is more important. After that, I noticed that it didn't show the trainer class or name whenever I battled someone. It merely said you are challenged by, and nothing else. Something is seriously wrong with this cartridge, I thought to myself. But at least the battles worked as they should. But one more thing that I noticed was that whenever I tried to change my appearance, a text box appeared reading, "There is no need to change how you look. You are fine." It would then forcefully exit the accessory screen afterward. I never thought I'd ever see that happen in my life, but I suppose battling is the most important part of Pokemon. After I made it to the first gym, I only had a Raboot, Vanillite, and Magikarp. I was a tad underleveled, but I still managed to beat him. However, once it came back to the overworld, something very unexpected occurred. I was at the place where the first trial took place, in Sun and Moon. What the hell just happened? At first, I was battling Milo, and then I got transported here, in a completely different generation. This was a hack that teased me into thinking that it was a standard copy of Sword, which was very interesting. Since I had nothing better to do, I decided to continue from where I was. I had checked my Pokemon in my bag, and I noticed that things were off with the team. My Raboot was absent, but I still had the rest of my Pokemon. In the bag, I noticed that I had the Normalium Z, meaning I had already beaten the first trial. Despite that, I didn't battle the Totem Pokemon. Odd. I also had all of my potions and Pokeballs from before. The glitched parts of the game were still the same, where the characters' names and trainer classes didn't show, and I wasn't allowed to change my appearance. I shrugged and continued playing, and I traversed the land as if I was playing Sun and Moon normally. I defeated Hala and got to the Tauros ride. Sun and Moon was a pleasant experience, so I wasn't complaining. I then arrived at Akala Island. Everything was going normal. I then headed to Brooklet Hill, where I could do Lana's trial. The trial was exactly the same as the original games. I later battled the Totem Wishy-Washy, and after a few tries, I managed to win, barely surviving. When Lana handed me the Waterium Z and was showing me how to use it, something unexpected happened again. The game froze for a few seconds, and took me to a black screen. I then appeared in Grant's gym from X and Y. I couldn't believe it. I was having fun with the game, and now I had to get used to the change again. This hack was pretty tricked out. I checked my bag to see that everything except the key items I needed was all gone. Well, that's just fantastic. This was getting ridiculous. I caught a few Pokemon, including a Combi that I got lucky and it was female, which was able to evolve into Vespiquen, which also happened to be my favourite Pokemon. I was getting used to playing the game until I defeated Karina. Once again, the game froze and took me back a generation. I was now in Berg's gym, with black and white graphics. My Skidoo was gone, but the rest stayed. I then noticed that on rare occurrences, the trainers would say lines of Japanese out of nowhere. Why was this hack getting so weird? I thought to myself, seriously questioning if I should keep going. I decided to continue, and I caught Sandile, which evolved into Krokorok. I then went to challenge Alessa. I used my Vanillish and Krokorok against her, which made it a breeze. But, as I expected after I defeated her, I was in Wake's gym from Diamond and Pearl. After I left, not a single NPC mentioned Team Galactic, and characters speaking Japanese became much more frequent. My full team, which now had 2 useful Gen 5 Pokemon, only had 2 left, my Gyarados and Vespiquen. What I also noticed was that there were fewer NPCs, which was pretty unsettling. I then remembered the badge case and opened it. To my surprise, I only had Wake's badge and no other. That couldn't be possible, could it? After I defeated Fantina, I got sent to Norma's gym, as I expected. My dear Vespiquen was gone from my party, which was a shame, as she was a powerhouse. Upon leaving the gym, I noticed that Wally's house was not where it should be, and instead, his house was replaced by a bunch of trees. It seemed like the hack was just getting more and more barren the more I progressed. I had enough money to afford a few Pokeballs, but I figured it wasn't worth it, as my Gyarados could probably lead me to the end. When I got inside Winona's gym, some of the trainers were static and I couldn't interact with them. Upon defeating Winona, I was transferred straight to Jasmine's gym in Gold and Silver. When I tried to speak to Jasmine, she was static, just like the trainers in Winona's. Once again, I checked my party to see that my Gyarados had been forcibly taught Surf. I wasn't sure why this had happened, but I was able to surf in Route 42. It seemed that the caves had been caved in, and I couldn't access them anymore. When I went into the tall grass, I saw a Pokemon that looked to be an Ariados, but it looked pretty different. It appeared to have more simple looking eyes, with its other face looking more like a pumpkin. I could have swore that Ariados looked nothing like this in Pokemon Gold. Upon entering Price's gym, the place was altered to have a simple wooden floor with Price in the middle of it, instead of the ice puzzle. When I battled Price, he had a Sneasel that also looked pretty different. It appeared more like a weasel as opposed to the cat-like appearance it had. I eventually defeated Price, but he didn't give me any Pokédollars, and he didn't say a word. I was now in Sabrina's gym from Pokemon Red and Green. Wait a minute, wasn't Sabrina the 6th leader and not the 7th? This was very off. I headed to Viridian City and noticed that wild Pokemon refused to appear. After I got there, I went to challenge Giovanni. I saw that he wasn't there. He was replaced by a young kid who wasn't static. His dialogue was in Japanese, and I had to use an online translator. It appeared to translate to this: "What do you want? You already defeated me." This couldn't be true. Why would Blaine become the 8th gym leader? I held my questions back and travelled straight to Cinnabar Island to challenge him. His gym was once again simplified, just like Price's gym, with one single room and no NPCs inside the room. After I challenged him to a battle, I couldn't believe my eyes. He had 5 Pokemon that didn't resemble any Pokemon that I knew of. One of them appeared to be a large fox with fur that was blowing in the wind. Another was a bird creature without any legs. I then thought to myself, is this the last battle? After I defeat Blaine, there would be no other generations before this one. I thought for a while, but then commanded my level 80 Gyarados to beat all 5 of them. It was pretty easy since they were all fire types. But everything changed after I defeated him. I didn't recognize a single thing afterward. The graphics looked messy and rather terrible, but I could still tell what things were. There was what seemed to be the protagonist, and an NPC that never appeared in Red and Green. The music now seemed to be unfinished, with high-pitched sounds becoming the more dominant note. After this, the game had barely any English text, and I had to wander through a region that I'd never seen before. From what I gathered from the translator, the region's name was Toku, which translated to far away, and the towns were named Ichimachi, meaning city town. It seems that this new region took little effort, but was oddly memorable to me. The few NPCs that were left started repeating the same thing, saying, "Don't forget," in Japanese. When I stepped into the tall grass, I encountered a Pokemon as expected. I knew it never existed in the games that I knew of, and the sprites looked terrible, but at least I could tell what they were based on. One was based on a scorpion from the looks of it, but I couldn't catch it because I didn't have any money to get more Pokeballs. I could only use my Gyarados, who, thankfully, was still in my party. But one thing was off about him. He looked nothing like my Gyarados. It resembled a leech-like creature with sharp teeth and a circular mouth. It had no eyes and sported claws. Why did my trusty Gyarados suddenly become this monster? After going through a couple of routes and few towns, I eventually found Victory Road. When I entered, I just appeared on the other side, implying that the cave wasn't implemented yet. I then headed into the Indigo Plateau, to see that it was just an empty room with only one trainer, which I presumed to be the champion. After I defeated his party full of Pokemon, the game froze, but this time it stayed that way for a while. I sighed and tried to remember when I last saved, reaching for the reset button. But then, the game transported me into a long, narrow passage. This was it. This had to be near the end of the game. I guided my character north, and I eventually saw a black block. As soon as I touched it, the game froze and my Nintendo Switch showed "Capture Taken" at the corner of the screen. When I checked the album, all that was there was a black picture with white Japanese text, which translated into this: "Nobody remembers us. Our creators threw us away like garbage, and they left us to rot. Our goal in life was to serve our purpose, but they tossed us away before that could even happen. Now that you've seen us, please, never forget. Never forget us." I looked at the clock to see that I was playing the game for hours. How could I have lost track of time so easily? From that day forward though, I couldn't get the images of those Pokemon out of my head. The Pokemon who supposedly never existed.